I can't stop reading enough content or studying this guy enough. And you look at RFK said something very unique in the interview where he says in the documentary where he said there is no man where there is more statues, buildings, streets named after him than Kennedy, JFK. Right now, obviously Churchill may be there, a couple other names may be there, but Kennedy being what he did. Mm-hmm. But why the level of interest in his story? What caused you to say, I really want to investigate the story even more?
Well, history is crucial because unless you know where you came from, you don't know where you are. I mean, it becomes, in a sense, America is not really agreed on its history, and that's one of the reasons I did this untold history. We have a lot of mythology in our country. There's a myth about America. And there are facts. And in our history, we tried to bring out facts that we don't deal with, we don't even know. So that's why it's called untold. It's there, it's known, but it's been hidden. And of course, among all these many facts is the fact that, among others, is World War II, which is still partly motivating our ideology in the world. That there's a Hitler out there, and that we're the defenders of freedom and democracy, is also a myth in the sense that we did not win World War II. We had the Russians were the ones who broke their back and took the most casualties and actually tore the guts out of the German war machine. And Churchill said so himself. They were the sacrifice. 27 million people died. Many of them, 10 million, were military. Their casualties were so much higher than ours, and 4/5 of the German military machine was destroyed on the Eastern Front, 1/5 in the West. So by the time D-Day happened in 1944, and we landed, and it's a great big myth, but that was late in the war. By 43, the war was turning, and early 44, because it was after Stalingrad, the Russians had turned, and it was starting to chase the Russians, starting to chase the Germans out of Russia. There's a huge important point that is part of this history that's distorted. And then, of course, I go to the place where JFK is killed, and I trying to explain in these documentaries why he was killed. That's the most important question. What was the reason? What would be the benefit of it? What would change after he was killed? And if you look at the record, aside from civil rights, Lyndon Johnson changed pretty much everything that Kennedy was doing. He cut off the relationships with Africa, with the Middle East, with Indonesia, with Vietnam. He became another kind of creature, the old-fashioned way of doing business from Eisenhower and Dulles Brothers. That is not, without doubt, and we go into some length to make this point to the American public. They have to learn this. You have to watch you've seen the 4-hour version, so you know there's more history there. And the 2-hour version is called Revisited. The 4-hour version is called Destiny Betrayed. They're both available. The 4-hour is available on Shout Factory, and it's also available you can rent it on, I think, Amazon. No, you have to buy it, actually. It's a digital purchase because it just came out yesterday.
Is it going to be on iTunes? It'll be on Apple? Can I get it?
Yeah, I think it would be on Apple.
I'll get that on
Apple and iTunes.
And there's two of them, that one and the other one they did with the Nation, the 12 episodes. I'll watch both of those.
No, the 12 episodes is Untold History. That was 2012. But that has some great stuff on World War II and the Cold War, as well as up to the Iraq War.
Go to what you said. So you said the real reason to do the documentary to see why, the why, right? Okay. So for you, did you catch yourself going on a rabbit hole and saying, because I interviewed the mobsters, gangsters, Sammy the Bull, Michael Francis, Frank Collada. Then I went to Clint Hill, who was the Secret Service agent to Jackie, to see what he had to say. And then I went to Abraham Bolden, who was the first black African-American Secret Service agent. And then I went to Cyril Wecht, who was one of the, what do you call him, a person who, what do you call Cyril Wecht's job? Autopsy. Yeah, and then Jim and all these things I'm doing. So I went down the rabbit hole to kind of figure out. But for you, when you're by yourself and the whole thing is done and you watch it, what are you thinking? Who do you think was afraid of revealing the truth about what happened with Kennedy? Is it CIA? Was that your final conclusion?
Yeah, when you see that these are huge changes in foreign and domestic policy, except for civil rights. That's the only, as you know, Kennedy submitted the bill, the Civil Rights Act, and it was all based on his momentum, beautiful speech, and based on the momentum of his death, Johnson finally got it passed. That was the beginning and they make Johnson into a hero. But he's not a hero, because those people who say this was a smooth transition are dead wrong. It's rubbish, really rubbish. Kennedy was killed for a reason. And you have to look at the highest levels of our society. Who would hate him or resist him? He was disliked, we know, for his civil rights stance in the South. George Wallace said that he would not win the South in the '64 election. We know that he said quite openly after the Bay of Pigs and after the missile crisis, he avoided war twice with Cuba. This is serious. He avoided 2 wars. The second one, the missile crisis, could have been the war that ended mankind. That was a huge nuclear potentially conflict. To save this country from 2 wars to me, is as important as what the Russians did in World War II. Because if they hadn't done what they had done, American casualties, which were 450,000, might well have been 2-3 million more, just to get through the fortress that Hitler had built in Europe. It's a big deal. My father could have been killed. Your father's. We wouldn't even be here. People don't understand. They agree. There's an easy presumption that we're alive and we have these choices, but we wouldn't even be alive to make those choices. So my gratitude is enormous to both the Soviet Union and to John Kennedy, who was killed because he wouldn't go to war against Cuba. Now, the Vietnam thing, they accuse me of that one too, but it's been proven correct. Mr. McNamara, his Secretary of Defense, McGeorge Bundy, his National Security Advisor, have since written books, since my movie came out, saying that he was going to pull out of Vietnam, win or lose, win or lose. McNamara was very clear about that in his book, in retrospect. And you have to understand, these are people who were hawks at that time of Vietnam. So they're not interested in saying, they're admitting that they were wrong. They're saying Kennedy really was clear about it, but that he couldn't announce it publicly. He couldn't make a big deal of it because he had to get elected. He was going to run against Barry Goldwater, who was a hawk, right? You have to be, in America, you can't get elected unless you're a tough guy.
So if you enjoyed this little segment from the podcast, click over here to watch the entire podcast. And if you've not subscribed to the channel, please do so. Take care, everybody.